Hi guys, today I'll be doing Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is always one of my favorite ones. It's an old PlayStation game. If you've played any of the Castlevania games, I was about to say it has a little twist, but now recently all of them have improved. Before this game came out, it was all just a side-scroller attack, and this was one of the very first games that tried to blend RPG style with that action style. So this was the first probably even of this from different series. This is the first game I ever played that had an action feel, but yet it still had experience and items and level up systems just like an RPG would. So it was a really cool style for its time. The one I'm playing or played this past week was for the new PlayStation 4. They came out with the 2-game bundle. You can replay it. It has trophies now, so that's a really cool addition. One thing I love about that version specifically is the little tweaks they added. They didn't really change that much of the game, but they added new features like the PlayStation 4 remote, how it has volume on it, so every once in a while a sound comes out of the controls. I normally don't play with sound, so it was fun to hear little voices and screams and picking up items coming from the controller. That made a fun little aspect of it. Another fun thing with the PlayStation version specifically is that it has a fun background. It is, you can tell it's basically just an emulator thrown in there. So to make up for the square TVs that they used to have, they actually have a cool little gothic background. So that's just a cool little flair that they didn't have to do, but it was fun. I know I mentioned they added trophies, but some of the trophies are really entertaining. They use pop culture references for the names of the trophies and things you have to do. I don't want to spoil too much of them, but they're fun. When you get a trophy, you're like, that's funny. And one thing I like about the game in general, not the update, but just the game, is that you can really pick your own difficulty. If you're like me and action games aren't really your strongest point, then you can sit there and farm and level up with the level up system. That way you get the advantage over fighting the monsters. Instead of them doing 20 hits of damage to you when you level up, they'll only do 3, so that means you can get hit 7 more times and not die instantly. Or if you're great at action games and you could care less about the level up system, you can make it extremely difficult, don't equip anything, and just go in guns blazing. So that's really fun about the game. The story was really incredible, and if you followed any of the Castlevania stories, it matched really well, and it did feel like a true Castlevania game. Even though they were experimenting with a new style of gameplay, you can tell they did not deviate from the story, and they wanted it to be a Castlevania game, and it most definitely was. Then I don't know if this is a pro or a con. Probably a pro for me because I love exploring. But one of the pros is that it could take weeks and weeks and weeks to beat this game if you don't have a guide, because some of the items you need to get are obscure, and you might have to run all the way across the castle and find this one item and equip that one item to be able to go to this one room that gives you the item that can let you fight the boss. And if you don't have a guide, I remember this was before like the internet and whatnot, so I didn't have guides back then. So me and my friend, we would spend months and months trying to figure out, and then if someone found something, we'd use the phones back then when we had phones. We would call them and say, hey, is blah 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 there? They'd pick up and I'd say, I found it, I figured out this secret, I know where it is. So it's incredible. You can spend hours and hours and days on this game. They have tons of hidden Easter eggs everywhere. There might be like a chair that if you sit in for a couple minutes, something funny happens, and just random things like that. Hidden rooms. You can buy a map of a basic castle, and so they have all these hidden rooms where even though it's not on that map, you can just bust down a wall and walk through. So it's kind of like a Super Metroid feel as far as the map and how that goes along. But it's the action of Castlevania, but the RPG of other games. It's really, for its time, and even now, it was just beautifully well done. Um, the cons with the game. I'll start with just the actual game itself. The only con is it can be brutal if you're not used to these type of games. If you get hit a couple times, you could be dead at the very beginning of it. But once you get items and armor, you can equip it and get better, and then you can play at your own difficulty. So I would advise, if you've never played this, save often. That's another thing. Sometimes you don't know where the save points are. You try to push yourself for the next save point, push yourself for the next save point, then you die, and then when you go back, you realize, oh, if I just went into that room, it would have been a save point. So if you want to play with a map, that makes it a whole lot easier. Normally I don't play with guides, but I play with a map just so I know where the save points are. So if I am in a rush and I have to not die, I can look where the next save point is and quickly get to it. I mean, obviously in the game, once you've been to the room, you can look at your map and see it there. But after a while, once you get your items, you can relax and not save as often, and enemies only do 1 point of damage when you have 300 health, so it's not as bad as the beginning. But it is just brutal at the beginning. For me anyways. I'm not good at those types of games. I'm good at RPGs, and that's why it's better later on, because that's when I get all that stuff. And as far as cons for the emulator goes, for the new PlayStation 4, it loads way too fast. I know that's a weird con, but in the original, it would actually have a now loading thing that would move. You get to mess around with it with your joystick and move it up and down and swirl it around. On the PlayStation 4, it just says now loading for like 2 seconds before you even get it to start moving. It just loads. So that's an old aspect that I can't toy and have fun with. And then another thing is, I don't know if all 3 of these are just one bug. It might just be a bug. I wanted to use the joystick so badly, so I kept going back and forth between the joystick and the D-pad. And I know the D-pad, I eventually just stuck with the D-pad and all these cons went away. So it's probably just a bug where if you jump between the joystick and the D-pad too many times. But the combos were incredibly hard to pull off, even when using the D-pad. But that's only because I was using the joystick. If I loaded the game without using the joystick, the D-pad was fine and the combos were fine. It's just anytime I touched the D-stick, or the joystick, the D-pad just went crazy. Another thing is I kept jumping into invisible walls. And it was only when I used the joystick, and then went back to the D-pad. So I would play with the joystick for a couple minutes, and then I'd play with the D-pad for a couple minutes, but when I was playing with the D-pad, if I jumped, I would just get stuck, and I just couldn't go. But that's not too bad of a con, because if you just stick with the D-pad, which I eventually ended up just doing anyways, then it's a really great game. That's it for my review. I would definitely say get it. It was on sale, I think this week, for $10, so yeah, there's no reason not to get that, especially with all the new trophies. And if you've never played the game, it's amazing to get into, and if you played the game, you got trophies now. So it's a win-win all the way around, especially for that price. It's an amazing buy. I would highly advise everyone to get that and check it out. And thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, just hit that like and subscribe button. And thank you. See you next time.